our student presentation. The thing about our students is they're not like a general university student. Our students are all leaders in their own rights, extremely senior entrepreneurs, as well as business executives, senior government officials, etc. So, Jerry, when I say our students, I actually mean our hybrid student. So Jerry Mundondo is speaking to us about exploring the impact of entrepreneurial resourcefulness on nascent entrepreneurial behaviour in students and the perception of entrepreneurial success in emerging entrepreneurs in a penurious environment. And this is really very interesting in terms of the case for effectuation and bricolage. So Jerry is somebody who's also very diverse in his background. He holds 2 master's degrees. One is a Master of Science in Analytical Chemistry, and the other being an MBL, the Master of Business Leadership. I think it's fascinating. He worked for Coca-Cola for 20 years, where he had a variety of leadership positions. But he actually now is an entrepreneur who runs his own business called Enzon Enterprises. And it looks at things like trademarking, market research, supply chain optimization, route market optimization, etc. And he also has a partnership with the Baker Tilly Central Africa, which is an accounting firm looking at technical consultancies. So, Jerry, I think from this perspective, we've certainly connected in terms of technology and innovation, but one of the really important aspects being the entrepreneurial angle. So I'm just going to take maybe 3 questions, what you would like to get out of Jerry's presentation of his proposed doctoral study. Jerry would have already been towards the, started data collection or around the literature review stage. Prof. Klopper, I'm not sure exactly where he is in the process.
That's correct, Marla.
Yes. So any specific questions that you would like to make sure Jerry answers or you hope to get out of the discussion? So I'll kick it off and say, Jerry, that what I hope to hear is your specific problem statement stated simplistically and what approach you plan to take to probe that problem from a methodological perspective in terms of research. So that's my hope for this. So Jerry, thank you. You're up now.
Thank you very much for that very elaborate introduction. And thank you, everyone. Yes, I'm a doctorate student. And this stage of my research, I've actually just gone through ethical clearance, and I'm at a stage now where I'll be going out to collect data. So this presentation for me is very exciting because I can get to hear some opinions that will actually help me with my next steps. Just a background of this topic. Firstly, I'll just start with a bit of a definition of some of those terms that are in the topic. When we are talking about entrepreneurial resourcefulness, we are actually talking about the ability to identify opportunities in the environment and to regulate and direct behavior so that one can successfully cope with the task of creating and managing an organization in order to pursue that particular opportunity. And then when we are talking about entrepreneurial behavior, we are actually talking about the constellation of functions, activities, actions that are actually involved in the perception of opportunities and creation of organizations. I'll also define bricolage as making do by applying combination of resources at hand to new problems and opportunities. This definition is according to Baker and Nelson. And then I also define effectuation as a decision-making logic that entrepreneurs use based on focusing on the means at their disposal, which consists of who they are, what they know, and whom they know. That's according to Sarasvathy, 2001. So this just gives a background of the definition of terms related to my topic. Now, if I look at, why this topic, why did I think about this? There's a lot of focus on unemployment, which is faced by a lot of developing countries. The growth of the economies is not actually matching the number of jobs that should be created to actually be able to provide the people going into the labor markets with employment. And it is actually estimated that in Africa, between 2010 and 2035, about 450 million new workers are going to enter the job market, which is a huge challenge for job creation. And then it can actually be argued that, these problems that are faced by developing countries can actually be partly resolved through the active entrepreneurship by its population. So the idea is that if people can go into entrepreneurship, they can create jobs, and those jobs can actually then help the people that are going into the labor market. And researchers also believe that entrepreneurship is a strategic response to job creation, has got the potential to address, poverty, social inequality, and unemployment. While a lot of studies have been done, and in different countries, to look at this area of entrepreneurship, a lot of the studies have actually focused on the area of developing entrepreneurial intentions and the entrepreneurial behavior itself. But there's a paucity of studies examining the link between entrepreneurial intentions and the actual entrepreneurial behavior. So that's really the focus of my study, to try and link those two. So the research seeks to address this gap, to say, how do we move from entrepreneurial intention to entrepreneurial behavior? If we look at the studies that have been done, you find that, as I have said, there's a lot of focus that has been done on entrepreneurial intentions. When people decide they want to be entrepreneurs, there's a lot of analysis that has been done there, and that includes intention models, they're like the theory of planned behavior, Isaac, 1991, Shapiro's event model, and a lot of studies around, personal variables, psychological and demographic traits. All these studies, we're trying to understand what helps people to develop the particular entrepreneurial intentions that they need in order to become entrepreneurs. The assumption around these studies was that entrepreneurial intentions are the precursor for entrepreneurial behavior. So if you intend, according to the intention models, if you have the intentions, you are likely to achieve the behavior. So the focus was really on understanding these intentions, with the assumption that if you have a way of understanding and addressing the gaps in the intentions, then you can actually influence behavior. But recent research has actually shown that the link between intentions and behavior is actually not that straightforward. And intentions can only explain 30% in variation around entrepreneurial behavior, which means there are other factors there that need to be looked at that definitely affects the behavior aspect. So in terms of my problem statement, and I think that partly answers the question that came up, I'm looking at the situation. I'm saying there's a lot of research that has been done to examine factors that impact intentions. But there's actually very little research that has been done around factors that affect the conversion of those intentions to behavior, and then subsequent entrepreneurial success. So there's been work that has been done, but the focus has not been that much. So there's a gap there. And then in addition, we know that entrepreneurial intentions alone are not sufficient condition to explain behavior. And therefore, we need to look at other variables that actually affect that link between intention and behavior. And then another interesting thing for me is that in a resource-scarce environment, like in Zimbabwe currently, it is very important to understand how intending entrepreneurs actually are able to bridge the resource gap. And that is very critical, because what comes to mind is, if I intend to be an entrepreneur, right, how do I get there? For a lot of people, the red light is resources. I just don't have the capital. I don't have the resources to do it. And so that becomes a barrier. So I want to look at that as well and say, how do entrepreneurs who succeed in this environment actually bridge that gap? And then the fourth point is that when you have a setting of a resource scarce environment, like we have, then resourcefulness becomes critical. Bricolage and effectuation are actually considered to be entrepreneurial resourcefulness factors. And because of the environment and context that I'm working in, it becomes very important to look at those. In terms of research justification, okay, in addition to what I've said already, I'm also saying that, when an environment is penurious and there's resources are depleted, it is very important to be able to investigate the role of resourcefulness so that you understand how intentions can actually be transitioned to behaviors. And in this regard, in particular, looking at bricolage and effectuation became very apparent for me because these are actually considered to be resource factors in an environment. And so I had interest to look at that. Then in terms of my research questions, the first part of the questions that I'm asking is, firstly, how do intending entrepreneurs move from entrepreneurial intention to nascent entrepreneurial behavior in an environment of resource scarcity? So I'm actually investigating how they actually do that in order to better understand, the dynamics involved. And I'm also looking at the role of effectuation in facilitating that move from intentions to behavior. I'm also looking at the role of bricolage in facilitating the same move from intentions to entrepreneurial behavior. Then in the second part of my research, I'm looking at emerging entrepreneurs, and I'm asking myself, how do emerging entrepreneurs move from nascent behavior to entrepreneurial success in an environment of resource scarcity? So I'm really interested in discovering how they do that. And I'm also wanting to understand what is the role, if any, of effectuation and bricolage in that process. Then the next one, in terms of the ontology and epistemology that I'm following, this is going to be a mixed methods research approach. The research is based on pragmatic knowledge claims, which combine both positivist knowledge claims that look at objective reality, and of course, constructivist knowledge claims, which says that reality is subjective and it can be multiple. And the key concern in this research is actually to resolve the intention behavior link by investigating factors affecting the move from entrepreneurial intentions to entrepreneurial behavior. In particular, the research seeks to understand what enables entrepreneurs to move from intentions to behavior. All right. And then my next point is that it's a pluralistic research method approach, and knowledge will be derived about the intention behavior link, as I've said. Then in terms of my research assumptions, I'm basically going to be using a student sample, and I'm also going to be using a sample from entrepreneurs from the SME database of SME Association of Zimbabwe. So I'll use that particular database. The assumption is that, with students, you're getting a good representative sample of potential entrepreneurs due to their training and their ambitions that they have. And of course, any conclusions that are reached will apply to that university population, but it can also give insights with respect to general population of intending entrepreneurs. The study is also assumed to address the research question, and a pilot will be conducted to ensure the survey questions address the research question before I actually start the collection. And the other assumption is that the research carried out on the SMEs affiliated to SME Association of Zimbabwe would represent emergent entrepreneurs who are still small and that seek to grow. And the assumption is that a sample of these SMEs will generally represent entrepreneurs who are seeking to grow. And therefore, the specific conclusions that are reached applies to this group of SMEs. But however, the focus is not on the individual entrepreneur. The conclusions can also be extended generally to upcoming entrepreneurs operating in a penurious environment. In terms of my research approach, I'm going to be using a sequential mixed method research design. And I'm going to be using the explanatory model. So in the phase 1 of the research, I'll look at quantitative data collection and analysis. Then I'll have a follow-through where I'll look at qualitative data collection and analysis. And then finally, I'll have a phase 3, which involves interpretation of quantitative data and qualitative data. So those are the phases that I will use for the research. And then I've got a research model and a hypothesis. So basically, I'm moving from entrepreneurial intention to behavior. But from intention, there's opportunity recognition. From opportunity recognition, there's opportunity exploitation. And then you've got the behavior. And then I'm going to be looking at the bricolage and effectuation affecting this move through these stages. And then I've come up with a set of hypotheses that address that. And there are about 20 hypotheses that I'm going to be looking at, addressing all the aspects, linking the bricolage, the effectuation with the progression from intentions to behavior. So that's going to be the core of my quantitative research. So out of that, I'll then get the necessary relationships after going through the analysis. And then as I've said, after going through there, I'll also do the qualitative aspect. It's based on cases, which I will choose. General recommendation from literature would be about 20 cases. So I'll be able to choose 20 cases which are most appropriate, and then I'll go through them to further understand what I would have gotten from my quantitative research. In terms of level analysis and sample size and rigor, for the quantitative approach, I'm looking at a sample size of 481. And then the level of analysis is at the level of the individual entrepreneur, individual student. For qualitative approach, I'm looking at a sample size between 20 and 25, and the level of analysis would be individual entrepreneur as well. But for the qualitative approach, the key guiding principle is, of course, sample size saturation. That is the guiding principle. So 20 to 25 is something in literature which is just recommended. So it might saturate before or around that number. So that would be my sampling. Then I do have, of course, a lot of the references around that. Okay, so that more or less covers, what I'm going to be talking around.
Thanks so much, Jerry. Dr. Sigamoni has asked you, is there an intention or opportunity for theory to emerge relating to entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs to combine resources to add value to constrained areas?
Very good question, and thank you for that. It's partly why I'm using qualitative analysis, because that process, although there's been a lot of research around that move into behavior and also how it actually happens, there's a lot of gaps. So I'm hoping when I look at, for example, the emerging entrepreneurs, I can gain from the interviews, from talking to them, and see if there's any theory that comes out of that, or if there's any extension of the current theories that would come out of that.
Thanks for that. Prof. Singh?
Jerry, I think I've heard you say that you're going to have about 20 hypotheses in the quantitative phase. I think you've got to be cautious there because you'll never finish the study if you've got 20 hypotheses and to test them statistically. You'd never finish this. Then the second part of my question is that you speak about relationships, but you mentioned that you're going to look at this in your qualitative phase. That's fine, but I don't hear you saying anything about correlations to see if indeed there are relationships between your variables first, and then to test the strength of those relationships. Because at doctoral level, that's the minimum you'd be required if you talk about relationships between variables. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I take your point around the number of hypotheses. I will certainly look at that. In terms of relationships, unfortunately, I couldn't put up my screen, but I do have, under the quantitative part of the research, I'm going to explore the relationships using statistical tools to see how they are actually related. But thank you for that. I've noted that. So there's a plan to actually do that, and there's actually, based on the hypotheses and the various correlations that emerge.
I think perhaps you need to engage with Prof. Singh a little bit on this, Jerry.
Sure, thank you. I'll do that.
So Dr. Landman says, and this is the last question, the problem you're describing fits into the domain of behavioral psychology, particularly behavior modeling. Is it your intention to draw from this area in your literature review?
That's an interesting one. My current literature review at the moment, I just drawn from it as far as analyzing the work that has been done in terms of psychological theories, especially around traits, individual traits, and social traits. So that's as far as I've done it, and how these traits actually affect entrepreneurship. That's more or less how far I had taken that into account. But I think something that I could perhaps look at.
Thank you, Jerry, for that. Lita, do you want to come on and finish up?
All right. So Jerry took us through exploring the impact of entrepreneurial resourcefulness on nascent entrepreneurial behavior in students, saying resourcefulness is really the ability to identify opportunities in the market to do something about it. Seeing it, grabbing it, getting it done. Jerry, I'm paraphrasing there. The situation that we're finding in South Africa and in Africa is unemployment is rising. There's not enough jobs being created. However, entrepreneurship could solve this problem. But it's about finding the connection between intention to be an entrepreneur and the behavior. That link seems to be tenuous at best. There's a lot of studies around the intention around entrepreneurship, but we need to study the behavior and how that then leads to success. Specifically in situations where resources are scarce, how do we figure out how entrepreneurs cross this barrier? Jerry told us that he's got a mixed method for research. He's got students and entrepreneurs in his sample. The research model is around finding that connection between intention and behavior. 20 hypotheses may be too much to identify the necessary relationships, both quantitative and qualitative. You can see the detail around how many in the sample with individual analysis, and the point being made, look out for when that saturation point is being achieved, and then the question around behavior psychology. So that is, in a nutshell, the visual summary for this afternoon session. Mala, back over to you.
Thank you so much for that, Lita, and thank you to Jerry and Alex for presenting today. I think that it was most engaging, and I wish you all the best. Thank you very much.